Alright, so Nero has been out for a couple of days, and I think that it's about time that we do my post-release analysis. Testing out Nero has been quite difficult because for a while, we actually did not have access to the campaign. So I had to wait for a couple of days for that to be fixed, and at the same time, I also had to spend a few more days testing her out against different bosses in the interception. But now that all the testing has been done, I can finally give you a detailed review and analysis for the newest character, Nero. So Nero is basically a burst type 2 defender, she is also an SMG user, she has the fire element, and she is also from the Tetra company. Moving on to her skills, starting off with Cat's Repayment. Basically how this works is that this will apply 2 different damage mitigation buffs, one for your characters that apply healing effects, and one for Nero herself whenever recovery takes effect within your team. The first one is pretty simple. If any of your allies have an ability that heals, they will receive the Cat's Repayment buff whenever they use it. But on the other hand, the second part of this ability works a bit differently. Activates when recovery takes effect, means that Nero will only get a stack from the initial activation of the healing skill. Take for example Noise. Her burst has an effect that constantly recovers your allies' HP. So some people might expect that Nero will easily get stacked because she will now receive healing continuously. But actually, Nero will only get 1 stack from the initial activation of the burst. The only exemptions for this are some of the healing skills that are passive. And a good example, and what I also think is the best one for giving Nero stacks, is Rapunzel's skill 1. This is going to heal 3 of your allies with the lowest HP every time Rapunzel does a fully charged attack. So obviously, because of the simple skill condition, Rapunzel is able to consistently give Nero stacks on her skill 1. There are also other characters that can help Nero stack her buffs, but we will be talking about that later in the team comp section. Moving on, we have her skill 2. This one is pretty straightforward, and I would say that it's mainly for PvP and boss fights, but more for PvP. Her skill 2 is basically an RNG passive that has a 30% chance of activating the 2 of its effects. The first one is going to increase the damage taken for the target, and the other one is going to deal a bit of extra damage to the target. This can be useful for PvP, but only against teams that heavily rely on keeping their tank alive. So let's say that you're up against a team with Noise on their first slot. Nero activating the first effect on her skill 2 will give your team an easier time in taking Noise out. And aside from that, before I forget, her skill 2 also increases her HP by quite a significant amount, so that is always a plus. But now, let's take a look at her burst. Just like what I said during my pre-release, Nero's burst scaling is very high, but it doesn't really matter all that much. The reason being is because Nero being classified as a defender means that she naturally has a lower attack value compared to the other character classes. So even though her burst will go above 1000% scaling, it's still not going to deal as much damage compared to the other units who also have a burst with a close to similar scaling and damage. If anything, the main selling points of her burst are the taunt effect and the HP potency buff, because these 2 things are what actually makes her a better tank. Moving on, let's talk about team compositions, mainly focusing on which characters actually pairs well with Nero. Typically, most healers will work with the tank unit, but because Nero somewhat needs someone who can give her stacks on her skill 1, then having someone who can do that is a big plus. So for this section, we are mainly going to take a look at the healers and how they interact with Nero. First up, let's take a look at Pepper and Mary. I'm putting these 2 characters together because they sort of work the same way. Pepper and Mary can both heal your allies using their skill 1 and their burst, so obviously that gives Nero stacks. But the problem is that they need to hit the target with their last bullet to actually activate their skill 1, which means that they need to do 9 shots in total for that to happen. And because Nero's Cat's Repayment stacks only have a 5-second duration, it's impossible to overlap the buffs. At most, I was only able to get 2 stacks of Cat's Repayment by using their burst after they give Nero a stack using their skill 1. Moving on, when it comes to Uni, I actually thought that she would be one of the better options for giving Nero her Cat's Repayment stacks. But after testing, the problem with Uni is that because the effect from her skill 2 will last for 10 seconds, this means that the recovery effect does not repeatedly take effect. Instead, its duration simply resets. So if you're not manually controlling Uni's attacks, she will only give Nero 1 stack for the whole duration of the stage. The method I'm about to mention is not optimal, but if you play her manually and spam her attacks, only doing 1 fully charged attack every 10 seconds, then you can still give Nero a stack consistently, albeit very slowly and not going beyond 1 stack. I'm not completely sure myself if this is actually a bug, or Uni's burst just don't work with Nero as well as I thought it would. Now taking a look at Bay Goddess Mary. She is actually able to give Nero multiple stacks depending on how many times you entered full burst. This is because the passive effects from her skill 1 actually counts as 3 separate buffs. It still doesn't make Bay Goddess Mary the best character to pair with Nero, but I just figured that it is interesting that she is able to do this. I have also tried all of the other healers, aside from Anne Miracle Fairy, and the results are pretty much the same for each one of them. They all give Nero 1 stack from the initial activation of their healing skill. Well, maybe aside from Blank, because she gives Nero a stack whenever she uses her burst, and another stack after the full burst ends because of her skill 2. The only problem is that the cat's repayment buff will only last for 5 seconds, so that is actually not enough time to get the 2 stacks to overlap. Overall, when it comes to healers and who can actually give Nero stacks consistently, the only character that can do that is Rapunzel. As of now, she is the only character that applies a single instance of recovery with a very simple skill condition. With that being said, even though Rapunzel is the best at maximizing the buffs from Nero's skill 1, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to pair up Rapunzel and Nero every single time. Yes, you would want to pair up these two characters for most scenarios because that is the only way you can max out the stacks on Nero. But if you are in the PvP arena, or you are up against a boss that deals a huge damage to a single target, Biscuit is potentially going to be a much better option even if she is not stacking Nero's skill 1. It's because Biscuit giving Nero invincibility is just too good. When I was testing her out against Altyson, the fight was 10 times easier with Biscuit. Yes, you can pretty much get similar results if you used any other defender with a taunt, but Nero definitely works well in that scenario. Although, compared to the other top tier defenders, Nero is not the most comfortable to use against bosses because you sort of have to finesse your rotations a bit. Especially when you compare Nero to Noah, it's almost like Nero is the worst version of Noah in terms of ease of use and utility. They both have a taunt on their burst, they both apply protective properties to their allies, and they both debuff their enemies. But Noah being able to taunt with their normal attacks, and also being able to apply a team-wide invincibility, just makes her a way better unit in a lot of cases. With that being said, Nero does have a couple of upsides when you compare her to the other tanks in the game. For one, she has one of the highest damage potential within the tank category. This is because her burst scales very high, and she can deal passive damage with her skill too. And one more thing is that she is also one of, if not the tankiest defender in the game. And what I mean by that is that she is able to take so much damage without necessarily having to apply invincibility. This is mainly because she is getting so much HP from her skill 2. So whenever you take a look at her HP in the character preview screen, that is actually not her final HP. When in combat, my Nero's build has almost 2 million HP. HP so high that it even beats out the HP of my fully built Senti, and it's almost double of what my other defenders have. And on top of Nero being very thick, remember that she also gets damage mitigation from her skill 1. So with all that combined, Nero is definitely going to be one of your best options for a tank, especially in PvP and boss fights. If you want to be as efficient on your upgrades as possible, I recommend upgrading her skill 2 first, then focus on her skill 1, and then save the burst for last. When it comes to equipment, you only need to upgrade her headpiece and torso, because these are the only pieces that increase HP. You also don't have to worry about getting the right stats, because you can't get bonus HP from equipment rolls. And the defense rolls are actually pretty bad, so it's not even worth spending your custom modules on that. For me personally, and how I'm building my Nero, I'm basically doing the same thing. I already have her skill 2 at level 7, and now I'm working towards upgrading her skill 1. I also have her headpiece and torso at level 5, so hopefully I can get more custom modules so that I can overload her gear and give her more HP. All in all, I have been finding the most success in using her in the interception and in PvP. I often switch between Rapunzel and Biscuit, but it just really depends on the situation and what the other team is running in the arena. I'm definitely excited to try her out even more in the solo raids, so if anything interesting comes up during that, then I'll be sure to make a follow-up video. Aside from the few problems with her kit that you have to work around, I'm actually pretty happy with what Nero turned out to be. So yeah, let me know if you are planning to pull for her, and if you already have her, let me know what you think about her playstyle. And as always, if you found this video useful, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.